So the word bubble on the front, the biggest words are student and expectations. And as a medium high teacher control classroom, I want to be able to set expectations for my students, but also let them run things and become more confident and empowered. That's another word on here. I think another one is understanding. That taking the time to not jump to a conclusion is really important and builds trust, which is huge in a classroom. I think what makes good teachers great is earning their students' trust. So here is my philosophy. I wanted to kind of model it after Becky Bailey's conscious discipline and her idea of understanding child development before we discipline and before we make plans. I also really like the idea of logical consequences put forth by Rudolf Dreikurs. It makes sense to have consequences that apply to the misbehavior. It prepares students for the real world, because when you make a mistake, the consequence has to do with what the mistake was. Teacher roles and responsibilities. I think that they're shared. I think that the teacher has a responsibility to establish a safe classroom, a productive classroom, but the students have a large part in that as well, that they have a chance to make rules, to build a community in their classroom with their classmates and the teacher. And the way that starts is with classroom democracy. I love the idea of student jobs. I think that they're critical to empowering students and giving them ownership in the classroom. I think it's just such a great way to have students feel important and to take pressure off of you as a teacher. Another thing that I think is important is to give students a voice. That a lot of times in their lives, they're still little and they don't have a chance to speak their minds, so classroom meetings they're so important. So having students know that they have a voice and that it's heard. And that brings us to motivation. Motivation, for my classroom motivation, I wanted to focus on self-determination theory. So mostly intrinsic, but also identified motivation, introjected motivation, and extrinsic, because I think extrinsic motivation gets a bad rap sometimes, but it's not necessarily always evil. To start off, though, I really want to focus on intrinsic motivation, and which, according to self-determination theory, is that students are acting out of joy, that they want to do the activity. And I think ways to do that is to do engaging hands-on and mind-on learning experiences that give them opportunities to explore the world around them while they're learning. Let them measure how tall they are or how long their fingers are or something like that to gather data, but it's also fun and they're active. Something that is so critical to teach our students is identified motivation, that it's kind of an altruistic view of following the rules and doing what you're supposed to because it's the right thing. They see the value in it. I think a great way to promote this type of motivation is to explain the why of an assignment, like multiplication facts. If we're talking about multiplication facts and memorizing them, we need to tell them that we want them to be able to succeed in higher math. That they need to memorize these, and that once they memorize them, harder math will go quicker for them. Introjected motivation is that students, they perform a task to, let me read the definition. To avoid punishment and guilt. And I think that we don't want to run our classrooms like that. President Uchtdorf talks about running things as guilt trips, and we don't want that. But sometimes there have to be consequences that motivate, that if you don't get your spelling packet done, you have to finish it during preferred activity time. And finally, extrinsic motivation. I think it's good to give students something to look forward to. If you set a class reading goal and the prize is 10 minutes of preferred activity time, I think that's a great idea. Give them something to work for, something to look forward to that's still productive. So, going back to rules and how we're going to establish them, my main focus is being kind, safe, responsible, and respectful. So those will be the rules that I present to the students, and then during the first weeks of school, we'll establish specific ones that will help us achieve those goals. And I think that's critical, to let students post the rules on the wall, and we'll make the posters together and make it a community thing to understand that this is for the benefit of everyone. Which leads right into prevention, that if you provide a setup of a classroom, that students know the procedures and they know what will happen if they follow those procedures and what will happen if they don't follow the procedures, that there's trust in the classroom and there's safety and there's an opportunity to learn. And you just establish a chance for them to succeed. When you establish rapport with them, you gain trust, and if you call them by name, learn about them, tell them about yourself. I think that's really important. I love to learn about my professors and their lives and their kids, and it's something it really helps me connect. And as people, we need to connect. To intervention. So if prevention fails, we always have interventions, and we have some mild, moderate, and severe intervention strategies. The one I wanted to talk about a little bit was a student is distracted with an object. So that's mild. It's not a huge deal, but they do need to be listening. So I would give them a look. I think students deserve chances to make up for what they did. So I would give that student a look, and I would motion for them to put it away, and if they did, I would leave it alone. But if they didn't, I would walk over calmly and just ask them for the item, and we could talk about it after class. Moderately, I think something that students do a lot is they blurt during lessons. And I was a blurter. I don't really stop before I think. So I think back to prevention, teaching them to raise their hands and why it's important not to interrupt each other, but also ignoring it as an intervention, ignoring that it happens. But if it continues to, pull that student aside and just remind them that we raise our hands in the classroom so that everyone has a turn to speak. And that's part of being respectful, and always tie it back to the rules that we make as a class. I think that's critical so that they can see the connection to their lives. And bullying is something that I will be really, really strict on. I'll teach my students about what it is and how to deal with it by themselves, but I will not put up with it. I was bullied as a child, and it's just something that I don't think any child should have to go through. So I'll be very strict with that. I'll make sure not to rush to judgment too quickly, but I will be swift and decisive once I do know that it is bullying. Here's my classroom map. It's set up for a lot of group learning. So we've got our tables here, and I know that they can't see this whiteboard all the time. So we have another whiteboard over here that everyone can see when they're looking this way. And then when we would use this whiteboard, we would come to the rug. And that's a chance for them to have a different station to learn in. This is my desk, so I can see everything. And the flow of traffic is really good. We've got our bookshelves and our cubbies here. And it just looks like an open classroom, but there's ways to move around in it. And I think I use my space pretty well.